I solemnly swear that I am up to no good.
Hello, welcome to the Cinema Savvy Movie Podcast, and welcome to episode 2 of our Harry Potter month. I'm Chris Garner, joined by my co-host George Aldridge, and today we'll be giving our review on Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, released in 2002, directed once again by Chris Columbus following the huge success from Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. And actually, for the longest time, this was my favourite of the series. I may retract that claim now. I'm sort of going through them all again, rewatching them, but I remember the hype for this one, and the hype was real. The first one had come out, was just huge success, not in terms of just the books, but the film really sort of propelled this as a series to be reckoned with. And I mean, everyone, I remember even as a little kid, I can't remember how old I would have been, 2002, but just booking tickets, the event of booking tickets for a movie. I think this was the first film I ever did that for, and it was a packed screen. I remember it so vividly in my mind. So, I mean, we'll go through this whole thing. We should say at the start that this is going to be spoiler-filled. I mean, Harry Potter's been around for ages. Most people have probably seen it or read the books at least. And we usually keep these as kind of like an informal chat, just, you know, two people who love Harry Potter. George, you definitely love it a lot more than me, though. You know a lot more about it than I do. And we're just going to keep it really relaxed like we did with the first one and just sort of talk about our memories of it and the film itself. So, George, do you want to just start us off, sort of like your memories of 2 and the events around 2?
Chamber of Secrets is a really intriguing one because it was the one I liked most when I was younger. Certainly up until about 08-09 when I kind of rewatched them in anticipation for Half-Blood Prince and Deathly Hallows, and I've got very vivid memories of this film, maybe for an illegal reason that I saw it as a cinema as everyone else did. However, I remember as a kid, my auntie came over from holiday and she gave us like 20, you know when people say stuff at the beach?
Yeah.
Well, I was just given loads of like PC games and a few films, and I remember that Chamber of Secrets was one of these.
Yeah.
So for the first like 8 years, I watched Chamber of Secrets, that every single time it got to the flying car scene, a Chinese subtitle would come up for 30 seconds. But it was in perfect English.
Yeah.
But I have this memory of just watching it illegally for 8 years and then finally going out and buying the DVD.
Gets ingrained in your mind, yeah.
Yeah, so I've always had these specific memories of watching the film, and suddenly it was amazing watching it non-pirated, and then Blu-ray came along. But it's one of them where I think we mentioned before we recorded the merchandise was a massive part of Chamber of Secrets, and because it came out so close to the first film, I remember my merchandise being more of this one. Although there was a lot for the first film, I distinctly remember my Lego Chamber of Secrets that would be attached and underneath the Lego Hogwarts set.
Yeah.
And I remember building it so many times. It had the awesome statue. It was this really cool set. And I think the merchandise itself, I had a Quidditch one, which I spoke about last time, where Malfoy was the Seeker, so it must have been for this one, because they came out so close as well. I genuinely don't know what merchandise was for what film.
Yeah, that's a great point, and we did talk about merchandise last time, and I think some of the items I said that I own, that I bought up in that review, were probably from Chamber of Secrets. I know, for example, like the Spellcaster that I mentioned last time was definitely from Chamber of Secrets because it was kind of a spin-off the dueling club scene in this movie. I also remembered when I was watching it, though, I rewatched this movie yesterday. I watched the extended edition of it. I know it's not a very common version of the film to watch, but during the Whomping Willow scene, I remembered that I had some merchandise, it was kind of like the equivalent of Buckaroo, if people know what that board game is, where it was the Whomping Willow, though, and it sort of like moved and rotated, and yet like put all like little packages and like suitcases all on the branches, and the things that you hooked them off with were like the flying cars, the Ford Anglers. I remember having that.
I remember that on TV now. Now you've mentioned that, I was thinking, I swear there's a Whomping Willow thing. I never have it, but now you've said you'd hang the car off it. I remember that really well now.
And another thing I had, I think I mentioned this last time, was this levitation set, I guess it was called. and it would blow little polystyrene ball up into the air, and it was like an obstacle course, and you had to like weave it in and out of all different things as it rotated around in the circle. I remember I had that. But really my biggest memory for stuff with Chamber of Secrets was definitely what you just mentioned with the video games. Quidditch World Cup was one, but actually Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets on PS2 was my first ever PlayStation 2 game. 2002, was the year that the PS2 came out. And this was my launch game that I had with it, and I was terrible at games. That's kind of a thing that's still with me. I'm awful at video games, but the opening level was all Nocturne Alley, and you had to sneak past is it Borgin and Burkes? Is that the name of the... You had to sneak past him, and I don't do well with like tense moments in video games and things like that, and I physically could not get past that part because I was too scared to play it even back then. But yeah, there was a lot of great memories, and I think you're right. I think because they knew how big Harry Potter was and just how big this was going to take off and what it was going to turn into, they really did ramp up the merchandise for this one. Especially considering, I mean, the movie itself, they knew it was going to be a success because they wanted to rush it out the year after, didn't they? This went into production, was it 3 days after they just wrapped on Philosopher's Stone?
Yeah, and by production, I mean, me and you know it, but some people might think, oh, that's maybe a screenplay. No, they were filming 3 days later, so there's the famous behind-the-scenes clips, well, not necessarily clips, but the kids are there, and they've just said, oh yeah, we've just broken this record, Daniel, and they're like, oh, that sounds cool. But at the clue, the young ones did not have a clue what was happening because it was, each day something was happening, but they were there filming / being educated. Whereas obviously for the producers, could you imagine hitting all these milestones, but you're like knee deep in production, so you can't take a moment to, take it in because you're just working outright.
Yeah.
I mean, the stress of that's insane when you think about it. How little time they had.
Mm. And I mean, with Lord of the Rings, for example, that was a film that had gone into production with all 3 films back to back, but that had like about 3 and a bit years of pre-production planning. Now, I'm having to guess somewhere along the line they would have had pre-production planning for Chamber of Secrets before they were filming Philosopher's Stone, because if they just went straight into it afterwards without a plan, that's insane. And the finished product, it doesn't feel rushed or anything like that. It really doesn't. As I said, for the longest time, it was probably my favourite Harry Potter film. And what I like about it, watching it again, I mean, I still absolutely love this film. It completely holds up even now. It feels like a logical progression from Philosopher's Stone, but there is that tonal change in it slightly. Not as much as Prisoner of Azkaban, but we'll get to that when we talk about that one. But it still feels very much in keeping with Philosopher's Stone, but as the characters age and they get maturer, the stakes do get higher, and we do get that tonal change in it. And I think you were telling me before we hit record that didn't they do something in post-production with the colour correction on the movie or something to achieve that effect?
Yeah, so with Chris Columbus in an interview, he was saying, the first film was very much setting up Hogwarts, making it grand. If you look at the corridors, the rooms, it's bright yellow, golden colours. He says, when we hit Chamber, because it does get darker, we did that in a lot of post-production scenes, so there was, colour correction, darkening stuff. You guys don't have to do that. But you don't notice it because it's subtle, and it does make it darker, but it still keeps that tone that's in the first film of this golden magical universe that they're in love with.
Yeah,
and it's very noticeable before we head into of the director changes between each film. We'll go into them as each film comes along next, but still very much a Chris Columbus film. But I think because of the production being so close together, that may be why they weren't allowed to alter these little things. I could guarantee you what you mentioned earlier. I bet the production designers were probably designing the Chamber of Secrets sets when they were in post for... I mean, they basically held Leavesden Studio for 10 years, and they kept most sets, but I guarantee you a lot of new stuff was being created either during the first filming or in post-production. Yeah,
and I mean, this whole set design thing, you just mentioned the Chamber of Secrets, I'm sure we'll talk much more about that later on in the review, is without a doubt one of the most impressive looking sets out of all 8 Harry Potter films. I love the design for this thing, and obviously we return to it later on in Harry Potter Deathly Hallows Part 2. And it was great going back to it, not just the hall itself, but even the doorway into it and how the snake moves around and it kind of unlocks snake by snake. Really, really impressive stuff. So that's why that surprised me when you said that it went into production 3 days after, because with a movie like that, especially with a big budget thing like this, without a plan, that should be an absolute train wreck, just completely. But it really isn't. It is really put together well. And actually, I was reading, as I said, I watched the extended edition. Although it's the second shortest Harry Potter book, it is the longest movie out of them all. And Order of the Phoenix, which is the longest book, is, I think, the second shortest, or is the shortest movie out of them all, which is kind of insane how they did that. But, I mean, I think they included everything in well. The extended edition really doesn't add too much. It kind of fleshes out a little bits of the sub-story lines. There's a scene which I think should have been left in, which is straight out of the book, with Lucius Malfoy and Draco going into Borgin and Burke's, which kind of teases the reveal of the diary, which we get in Flourish and Blots in the scene straight afterwards. There's also a fun little Gilderoy Lockhart scene, and we'll get to Gilderoy Lockhart later on, but any more Gilderoy Lockhart is completely fine with me. So I just want to sort of like talk about what I remember from the movie in the cinema, and then we'll get into the film much more. So as I said, it was completely packed. We'd booked tickets for it, and this was still at the time where at the cinema, I'm sure this still goes through a lot of cinemas, but not my local, where if you book a ticket, it allocates you a seat number, and you are meant to sit in that seat. So we get in there, we must have been a bit late, completely packed, almost no seats available at all. We find that our seats are 2 seats directly from the front of the screen. Now, if anyone sat in those seats, you know that they're the worst seats you can possibly sit in. Your neck is sort of like craned up in this horrible contortionist pose. You can't really take in the entire scope of the film, and especially with a film such as Harry Potter, that's what you really want. So I was really sort of like down with it, because, like, you know, I wanted to see Harry Potter, and yes, I was there to see it, but I wasn't going to be able to see it for the beauty that it was. Luckily, we managed to find 2 seats at the back. I think I went with my mum for this one, so we went to the back and I got to take in the film. And just the experience of this film, I remember it so well, and that's why I think subconsciously this was my favourite one out of the series for a long while. Especially the climax of this film, when they finally get to the Chamber of Secrets and the whole basilisk attack. The scene where Harry's hiding in the pipes because the basilisk's been blinded and it can only pick up on sound. You could literally hear a pin drop in the cinema when that snake was slithering around. I just loved it, and I think, like, with the dark of the cinema and the surround sound, it really added to that ambience of it, and I think that definitely left an impression on me. As well as it being, well, straight afterwards, if we're going to move on, but Richard Harris's final performance of any movie, and the final time that we see his incarnation of Dumbledore.
Yeah, I mean, if we go to the memories briefly, I think I mentioned the pirate one, but I don't remember seeing this at the cinema, which is very, very strange, because I can remember seeing Philosopher's Stone, Azkaban at the cinema. I remember the first times I saw Goblet of Fire and Order and every other Potter film, but I think I've got such vivid memories of that Chinese subtitles popping up on the car scene. I just don't remember seeing it in the cinema, which is a shame, because obviously I remember the other 7 films and how they turned out, but I did see it. But I think, obviously, with you being a few years older than me,
yeah,
I can't remember the experience, and I think that again goes down to how close it was to the release date, because I was 5 in the first film and only 6 in this one. I do remember, though, the TV spots, and I vividly remember Malfoy and Harry squaring up to each other before Dueling Club.
You wish.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it would cut to Quidditch.
Yes.
And
yep.
I remember thinking, is this a new sport? Because obviously the TV spots didn't show the Quidditch pitch. They showed the wooden stands and them flying around in there. And I distinctly remember then they finally got to Quidditch. I was like, oh, it's the inside of the Quidditch stadium, is it?
Yeah.
So it was one of those things where I can remember the TV spots, but not the actual film.
The actual movie, yeah.
That's really bizarre. Whereas all the other ones, I've got so many memories of each Potter film, but...
Well, my memories of the Harry Potter films are really skewed, and I mean, what you talked about there, watching a copy of Chamber of Secrets more than the actual movie, I have that more with Prisoner of Azkaban, but I mean, we'll get to that when we get to that review. But yeah, so there's a lot of fun memories I have with this one. But if you want to, should we talk about Richard Harris? Considering, you know,
yeah,
I just brought it up a minute ago. Yeah, it's a real shame. Now, we've discussed at nauseum sort of like the differences between Michael Gambon, Dumbledore, and Richard Harris. To me, Richard Harris is the best Dumbledore. He felt like a sort of like wise old granddad character where you could go to him for advice and he'd lay life lessons on you. He genuinely felt like a nurturing character. like a guardian that was watching out for Harry. Now, when we get later on in the books and later on in the movies, and we find out that Dumbledore pretty much perhaps isn't sort of like as well rounded as we initially thought he was, I think Gambon probably works better for that. And I think you said before we hit record, you don't see Richard Harris being able to tap into that part of the character.
I'm currently looking at a book on my desk, which I finished reading now, which is The Half-Blood Prince, and you have to. This sounds really nasty because obviously he passed away, and this is many years after. Anyway, I could not, for the hell of me, ever think of Richard Harris picking up a wand, let alone using it to have fire, let alone having that fire spinning around his head. But what I will say about the Richard Harris Dumbledore is that you're right with the whole the genius, the half moon spectacles, as the books call it. He pulls it off so well. But I just think it's the hidden half of Dumbledore, which we do find out about later on, which I don't think he could have done. But I would say that he suits the Chris Columbus Harry Potter films far more so than Michael Gambon would, vice versa. I think if you look at the tones of the films for each Dumbledore appearance, they nail the Dumbledore, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's the sort of... He loves his sweets, and the passwords sherbet lemon, I think, to his office. It's so Dumbledore-y, and he has got this wisdom. But then there's a different incarnation, and I'm assuming that with this Fantastic Beasts pentology that we should get another Dumbledore, and that will be different because he'll be younger, it'll be different. So it's an intriguing one. But it's a shame for Richard Harris, because I didn't know he passed away before the film, but we both spoke, we've got distinct memories of finding out. Mine was seeing a newspaper which just said Dumbledore dead on the front page.
Yeah.
I
remember that too.
I was rather confused about that, but obviously you find out that it's the actor. So it's actually, at the age of 20, that's quite tasteless when you think about it. Given he's done so many other films and won Oscars, stuff like that. But it was a massive shock. I mean, these kids would have not grown up with him, but they looked at him as a mentor, specifically Daniel Radcliffe, who had so many scenes of him across the films. And it must have been a shock for them, because he did his filming and he was ill during that bit. It got in a far worse condition, and I think Chris Columbus said the last words he ever said to him were, "Don't you dare recast me." Which is, it's
impossible.
Great.
Yeah, it's impossible. But no, he has a good point. And although he does get recast, obviously, in Prisoner of Azkaban, in many ways he doesn't, because it is kind of the last time. Yeah, exactly, it is kind of the last time we see that take on Dumbledore. And I mean, the last scene of the film, I'll talk more about that later. It always gets me choked up watching the last scene of Chamber of Secrets. Definitely with the soundtrack. Reunion of Friends is my favourite track out of all the Harry Potter soundtracks. And just when it's more centred on Hagrid, the ending scene, but I mean, you do have Richard Harris standing up and applauding, and it is kind of a nice farewell to the character. So I guess how we're going to do this, we can start just by going through the whole film as it goes through. So, like most of the Harry Potter films, we always start with the Dursleys, and the chemistry between them all is so much fun, because you kind of love to hate them. And in this we get, I think it's Vernon is sort of entertaining dinner guests, something to do with his career, something that's going to further his career, and they try to make a good impression. He says, like, Petunia, you're going to stand by the fireplace waiting to welcome them graciously into our home. Dudley's going to be by the door. Harry Potter's got to be upstairs and he's got to stay there. Where we also get introduced to a brand new character for this film, which will have a very significant impact towards the latter part of the series, which is Dobby. I hate this little son of a bitch in this movie. I hate him so much, and I actually just found out before we hit record that Toby Jones does the voice. Never knew that. I never knew who did the voice of Dobby. I cannot stand his character in this movie. He's annoying. He's irritating. When he keeps saying bad Dobby, and smashing his head over stuff, I just wanted to strangle the little bastard. But we'll talk about it more when we get to Deathly Hallows Part 1. He becomes just a completely different character in that movie, and I love him at that point. But this is always the foundation of the character. I don't know if you have fond moments of Dobby. I actually... we'll go through it more, but there always was that kind of rivalry. There was always that rivalry between Harry Potter series and the Lord of the Rings one, and I always used to see loads of comparisons between Dobby and Gollum. I don't know if it was that they always referred to themselves by the name and the kind of, a CGI character. I don't know, because the characters are completely different. in the terms of their characterization, but I did see that always floating around, like on the playground or something. It was like, oh, who's better, Gollum or Dobby? But no, I can't stand Dobby in this movie.
When I was younger, I was exactly like you. I couldn't stand him from an early age, which is more shocking. Because obviously so many children loved it, but I just didn't like him. I liked other people like Lucius, who I'll get to, and there was just something about him which was so annoying. And I suppose he is that, but I used to get so angry at him just seeing him on screen hitting himself. Like, don't hit yourself with a lamp. But I guess that's how the character is. You're meant to empathise towards him, and I'm not going to do one of the whole books things, but in the later books they talk a lot about the house elves, which has got far more meaning, and Dobby does come into it a lot more.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate the change of character into Deathly Hallows. Certainly is what happens. But when you meet him, it's this intriguing character, and I just never really liked him.
No, I mean, he's really overly slapsticky, and he does have noble intentions. I mean, he's trying to make Harry Potter not go back to Hogwarts because he knows the danger that's going to befall him.
He takes all the... He
takes the letters from Ron and Hermione, and he keeps them, and he doesn't show them to Harry Potter. The thing with the cake really, really annoys me, because that just completely puts Harry Potter in the shit. He just does all these things all the way through, blocks the passageway to 9 3/4, everything like that. Even the rogue bludger. So all these moments in the film where he puts Harry Potter in more danger than perhaps Tom Riddle would do. It's just, I never really gravitated towards character, but it does lead to some amusing moments with the Dursleys, which ultimately makes them put bars on Harry's window because they think he was the one that dropped the cake on them. Where we're introduced to yet another new thing, probably the most iconic thing I would say from this, certainly in terms of being a book reader, reading the original books, which was the front cover, which is the blue Ford Anglia, the flying car, driven by the Weasleys. And this sort of like takes us to is it the Burrow? Is that what it's called, if I remember rightly?
Yeah. So
the Weasleys' house.
Yeah, we're taken to the Burrow for the first time.
And we get introduced to the extended Weasley family. We met Molly Weasley in the first one at Platform 9 3/4, but we are introduced to Arthur Weasley, played by, Mark Williams, isn't it? If I remember. Yeah. And he is that character. He just completely fits right in. And he's such a likeable character as well. It's a really likeable family. I love seeing all the Weasley moments, and that's probably why this was one of my favourites in the series.
Yeah, and the Weasleys are great. And with the Ford Anglia, it's great because I think J.K. Rowling said one of her mates, it was her first car. So she obviously had memories, which is why she wrote the car in.
Oh, that's cool.
So there's a little niche thing there. But with the Weasleys, I just loved... I loved the first time. I remember... not necessarily the scene, but when I went to the studio tour, they had the Burrow sort of kitchen area where they had... obviously, it wasn't really working, but it was all live action, from the knitting machines to the bowl that spun.
Yeah.
I loved the fact that everything was so real, and Harry has this face of awe because it's the first time you see wizarding stuff away from Hogwarts/Diagon Alley. It's the first wizarding home you get to, and I just remember that clock, which is great.
Yes, yeah.
Mortal danger, away, home, Quidditch, stuff like that. But when you said you meet Arthur Weasley, who is without a doubt probably my top 10 characters of the series, he is so likeable, and it's weird with him because he's not in the film so much, but every time he's in this scene, there's just this grasp that he has on me and myself, and from everything, he's meant to be telling them off. Is like, how did the car go? And he starts making the noises. He's just great, and what I love is just him and Molly's relationship.
It is that classic family dynamic, though, isn't it, between them all?
Yeah, they're a happy family, eating their breakfast, all in their pyjamas. And then you've got Molly, who's the serious telling off one. Arthur, who's having a laugh. Fred and George, who are one of the best double acts in cinema / books.
Yeah.
Percy, the sneezy sneezeball who no one likes. That's more in the books though than anything else.
Yeah.
But it's just great seeing them all together, and then you've got Arthur, who, if I'm going to speak about again, if you look at these films, books, whatever you want, he's really the only functionable father of the entirety of it.
Yeah. Malfoy in different ways, he goes completely off the rails, but
except bringing up his son to be a racist and a murdering clan. Although I still love Lucius Malfoy, he's the only functioning one, which is why there's an attachment to him, and that's what I think Harry sees him as well. There's not many fathers in these films. Sirius Black's a father figure, but it's not his dad. The same with Lupin.
Yeah.
But
And it is that nice moment, isn't it, when Harry gets to the Burrow for the first time, and I think Ron says it's not much, but it's home, and Harry just says, I think it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, all the trash talk that Lucius Malfoy calls out on the Weasleys, like them being poor and they all like share one room and they live in a hovel somewhere. It's like a genuinely really nice house. Like, I wouldn't mind staying there for a while. And also with the whole family thing, not so much in this one, because I know a lot of people sort of... It's probably done a lot better in the books, but a lot of people criticise the whole Ginny-Harry relationship thing and maybe see it as a bit tacked on and a bit sort of like, it doesn't own it. But we do get the seeds of that in this movie, where she comes rushing down the stairs, locks eyes with Harry, and kind of gets really scared and intimidated and like runs back upstairs because she doesn't know how to handle the situation.
She always fancied him in the books, and then they obviously just got together in the sixth film. Similar to the book, it didn't. I won't lie, it didn't make as much sense in the books. It's awfully done in the book and the film. I'll say that. I don't like the character of Ginny. However, in the book, she's far more sassy. Is that down to not giving her enough time in the films, or is it down to necessarily a performance and ability from an actor?
Or
I don't
direction,
know. Yeah, but certainly, obviously, Ginny, as we get to the end, is a massive amount of importance to this film.
Definitely.
Especially as the only Weasley girl, too.
Yeah. So we kind of move on from there. They do the whole flu powder thing, and that's a thing that I've never really understood with the movie and indeed the book. Why, Molly says, say it very, very clearly, and he just says it like a complete idiot, like diagonally. Like, why would you do that? Ends up in Borgin and Burke's, which is where the extended scene is. And actually, this is another vivid memory I have of this film. Is it like a mummy's hand that comes down and grabs his wrist?
The hand of glory.
The jump scare of all jump scares, that used to terrify me as a kid watching that. I used to have to like pinpoint the exact moment it happened so I could anticipate it.
Now you've said it, I've got the same unfortunate memories.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the key part in the sixth book, but it's not in the film, which is very slyly done, I'd say. But the Borgin and Burke shop. The other thing, now you've said Diagon Alley, what makes it more annoying is they're actually on Nocturne Alley.
Yeah. And they really make this creepy. Like, even me now, 23 years of age, still get creeped out with this Nocturne Alley scene. Just the extras. It's the one guy who's like, Harry goes to walk through like an archway, and there's just like this really creepy lurch guy just standing there in the corner, not doing anything. He's like really stoic, but he just looks weird. And then you've got all these people sort of like clawing at him and saying like, oh, come with us, we'll help you find your way back. It's just a really weird scene, but I think they completely capture that essence of Nocturne Alley. I remember reading the book. Now, granted, I read the book way back in 2002. I am starting to go back through them all again now. But I remember it being very much the same in the book, sort of how it was described. Maybe they ramped up the creepy value of it slightly more in the movies, but I remember it being very much the same, especially Borgin and Burke's.
Yeah, and Borgin and Burke's, obviously you've seen Extended, which has got the deleted scenes in. It's so creepy, but then again, they do come back to in Half-Blood Prince, especially with Malfoy's mission, but the whole Nocturne Alley is kind of like that freak of the week, but they've stuck them all in a dark alleyway.
Yeah.
Then Hagrid's just chilling there in the background to get flesh-eating slug repellent, is it?
Yeah, that's it.
And, it's just this moment of magic, and the next thing you know, he's in Diagon Alley, so it's all about slyly introducing Harry to the darker world, which they come back to, but the main point of it in the book is to introduce Lucius. However, the film does cut that out, and I believe to do it in a far better way down the line on Diagon Alley.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting thing. But like when I was watching it, I knew of the Borgin and Burke scene anyway, but I hadn't seen it in context of the movie. And it is kind of weird when he then introduces himself as Lucius Malfoy in Flourish and Blots, because we already have kind of an introduction to him, and they kind of repeat it. So I understand why they cut it out. The flow, I think the theatrical cut flows a lot better than the extended cut, but the extended cut was kind of... I'm so used to the theatrical cut, I just wanted to see what the extended one was like. One thing I did want to mention, though, I mean, this is again just sort of like personal opinions, like when I was watching it, and sort of the feelings I had towards it. I kind of had it with Ron Weasley's character when he first shows up and he says, "Hiya, Harry." But I really got it with Hermione when I first watched this movie. I think I was 9 when this came out. I'm trying to think of the age thing. 7. Yeah, I'd have been about 8, I'd have been about 9 or 10, I think, when this came out. When Hermione shows up, the voice change slightly. These characters are getting older. They're entering puberty slowly. And it was a very weird experience, like, growing up yourself, like, you are consciously picking up on things like that. And because I'd watched Philosopher's Stone so many times on video, and I knew sort of, like, the tone of everyone's voice and everything like that, it was that kind of immediate shock, like, whoa, okay, these characters are slightly different now than the first one. I don't know if you ever had that experience.
I did, and I should have told you this before, but I don't want to take your attention away. If you watch not their faces, but you can see across the second film their face, not face change across the scene, but you can see that some of this is done at the start of production, some of it's the end. So obviously their voice is different, which you pointed out, but some of their facial shapes as well. That's so weird. But the one I always remember is when Harry first sees Fred and George, the way he pronounced them is like, it's like Fred.
Fred
I always used to
George.
laugh. It's like George.
Yeah.
Like, I always used to laugh at it, but you know, you can see shades of it in Philosopher's Stone, but it is going to happen. And I don't sound bad, but the gap between 2 and 3 did help the most because they'd all obviously hit puberty in the third film. Yeah. So the changes wasn't happening. But you can't shoot a film in chronological order unless you're dependent on having an Oscar for yourself and shooting in natural light and making it 6 hours long too.
Exactly. But no, that just sort of came to my mind as we were talking. I remember having that experience in the cinema. Right, can we get to... It's a scene where 2 of the best characters in Harry Potter share, actually.
And not just the best characters from this film, from the series.
No, from the entire series. Shall we kick off with the main one?
Yeah.
Okay. Gilderoy Lockhart. Man, this guy... Every single scene he's in this film is a pure delight to watch. Kenneth Branagh, and I was actually just checking over other actors that were originally going to be cast for the part, and Hugh Grant, yeah. I could have seen that working. I could, but Kenneth Branagh's so good in this film. Actually, Sir Kenneth Branagh, isn't it? Is he a Sir?
Yep,
I think he is.
Sir Kenneth.
It's just perfect, and I don't know what else I could say about Gilderoy Lockhart. Just he's so sleazy, he's so egotistical, but you can't help but love him. It's the scene later on, I'll get to the Defense Against the Dark Arts lesson, but even from this one, where, you know, he's playing up to the journalists and the photographer and everything like that. He gives Harry Potter a collection of his entire collected works free of charge. Clearly isn't doing it out of niceness, he's just doing it for image, and I think he says when he grabs Harry Potter, he says, "Come on, we'll rate the front page." He's great, and the theme song as well, the soundtrack. Now, tragically, I did listen to the Indiana Jones The Last Crusade soundtrack. There's a track on that soundtrack called No Ticket, and it basically is the Gilderoy Lockhart theme. Or I guess it's what the Gilderoy Lockhart theme eventually became. So it was kind of depressing because I thought this was such a unique piece of music crafted for this character, but we clearly see that John Williams took a lot of inspiration from this song in terms of that it was pretty much plagiarised, but I'm not going to hold it against John Williams because he's great, and I think he was actually under a lot of strain to get the soundtrack together for this film. We could talk about music as its separate thing. I think another person had to come in and sort of like help craft the soundtrack along with him. But no, Gilderoy, every single scene he's in, and it really depresses me that when we get to Order of the Phoenix, because there's a great part in the book where he cameos again and his character crops back up. I was really hoping he'd come back because I can't have enough Gilderoy Lockhart. He's amazing.
Gilderoy Lockhart has an Order of Merlin, 3rd class, and he's an honorary member of the Dark Force Defence League, and he's a 5-time winner of Witch Weekly's Most Charming Smile.
Did you add the wink in there? I hope you added the pause and the wink where he winks at himself in the portrait.
I wish I could, but I can't wink as good as him. And as far as Harry Potter introductions go, only Dumbledore can match that. As Order of Merlin 1st class, chairman of the Wizengamot, or I forgot how you pronounce it, basically the Wizard Court. But anyway, Gilderoy Lockhart is by far the funnest character in these films. From his introduction, from that weird smile where his cheeks pop out with him, and that weird noise he makes, it's like "Oonch," it's something like that, like when he's smiling. Oh, I can't.
Yeah. And
it's just how everyone's obsessed with him, and all the guys just sit there in the corner, just hating him. And this is the first scene. This is Flourish and Blots. This isn't even the actual lessons, and it's just so funny. And then he just spots Harry, and right, we've got to get pictures.
It can't be Harry Potter. Oh, he's brilliant. Just every scene.
And they've mentioned Hugh Grant before being in it, and I just don't want to have ever imagined it. I couldn't think of him doing any funny stuff. I could just imagine him sobbing on about loads of malarkey and Love Actually, when really he's got to be this fun guy. To be such a sleazeball, you have to create this mental perception of yourself, which he does so well. And it's just so funny. Every time he's in a scene, he steals it. Even at the end, I know I'm jumping on, when he's flying, he's like, this is just like magic.
Yeah.
Even without a memory, he's the funniest person in the film. But I love him. And then you find out he's the Defence Against the Dark Arts teacher, and it's even better.
And you already know that something's going to be completely wrong with that match, because we all know that the Defence Against the Dark Arts teachers always have some kind of shady past, or are pure evil, or work with Voldemort or something like that, and that's kind of a trope that carries on throughout the entire books. I do question Hogwarts' recruitment agency. They clearly didn't do any background checks on this guy, or see that he really doesn't know any spells. Well, he does know spells. Whether he knows the right ones, that's a different matter. Like Brachium Ermendo, for example.
What's more intriguing is this is really jumping the barrel, but it's not in the sixth film, so we can talk about it. Voldemort had a job interview for Defence Against the Dark Arts in 1945.
I'm imagining Ralph Fiennes Voldemort now,
just
in a job interview
with Dumbledore,
with a snake nose and everything, just bald-headed.
And basically, whoever would taught Dark Arts taught it for 50 years before then.
Yeah.
Voldemort's turned away. Dumbledore doesn't want him. He knows he's a fishy bloke. But after that job interview, they never had a Dark Arts teacher for more than 1 year. And what I find fascinating is that, wait, I'm sure I read Professor Quirrell was at Hogwarts for years.
Yeah.
Turns out Professor Quirrell taught Muggle studies for years, then chose to do 1 year of Defence Against the Dark Arts, which is where he obviously failed. So there was a curse from 1945 onwards, which no one ever investigated about this school having a teacher for a year. But it's just this kind of cool, Voldemort meaning to it, which they chose to leave out of the films. But no, he's great. But if he's going to apply for the job, he's got the attitude for a job interview.
Yeah, he's got the charisma, he's got the charm.
Yeah, he knows his stories very well.
Yeah.
So he would impress everyone. But what I love about him is, as the scenes go on, how the teachers, they're almost laughing because they know he's so useless. And there's the one of when, I don't know which person's been petrified, and he comes out like, it's like blasted, like, I would have had the counter curse to have caught him. Yeah,
and then Richard Harris does this great sort of like looking over him from like the rim of his glasses, and like he knows he's cotton on. And there's doesn't Snape get a great one as well? And McGonagall at the end before he starts packing in a haste, where he's like, didn't you say that you knew where the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets was yesterday? Like, you can vanquish the monster. And he's just like, I'll be in my office getting ready. And then he's just like, there's actually, I know
he misses one attack. Yeah. Because, sorry about that, I was asleep. And he's just...
dozed off, what did I miss? Yeah.
I love him. And it's such a shame. They writ the cameo for the fifth film. They just didn't do it.
Did they?
That it was written, but I'm guessing they just must have scrapped the St. Mungo scene in general.
Yeah, I don't know how expensive it would have been to get Kenneth Branagh back just for that one scene.
But it's a brilliant scene in the book.
Do you know one thing I noticed, though, with Gilderoy Lockhart's character, which just makes me like him even more? It's in the scene where he's packing up and Harry runs in and catches him in the act, when he's stuffing everything in his suitcase. On his desk, he's got like a kind of mannequin head with a hairpiece on it that he throws in the suitcase. So Gilderoy Lockhart is like completely bald underneath that wig.
Oh no, you ruined it.
I mean, he has got fantastic hair, don't get me wrong, but he just like stuffs this hairpiece into his suitcase. I'd never noticed it before until I watched it yesterday. It just made me like his character even more. I think other actors as well. I think Jude Law was up for the role as well. There is no topping Kenneth Branagh. He just completely makes his character his own, and just so much impact as well from relatively a low amount of screen time. Like, I was watching Chamber of Secrets yesterday, almost a 3-hour movie. He's in like notable scenes, but he's not in it a lot. Probably the longest unstretched scene that you get is with the Defence Against the Dark Arts class. I would have loved to have seen more of him, but sometimes with characters, less is more. But we need to move on to another amazing character. I could talk about Gilderoy Lockhart all the time, and we've talked as well, like with all these spin-offs that are coming out, like Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. we want to see like a Netflix TV show or a series of movies.
Idea. I tweeted J.K. Rowling. I'm still waiting for my response. Picture this Netflix drama of this man in St Mungo's hospital for magical illnesses and treatment, and he's trying to rediscover his memory, similar to Jason Bourne, but in fact, he eventually discovers that he was this amazing fraud, but he's aware that Harry Potter, the boy who lived, is the one that almost is responsible for him. So he goes on this manhunt. However, every single day it goes by, he forgets it was Harry Potter, so must remember to forget. And it's just this ridiculous sitcom.
And then he could go back and retrace his steps through all the stories in his novels, and we could get some magical adventures that Gilderoy Lockhart goes on in his mind as he reads these books to rediscover himself and go on a revenge mission against Harry Potter. Tell me who wouldn't want to see that. I want to see that. Get Kenneth Branagh back in it. I love him.
And the series finale is when Harry visits him in St Mungo's and he doesn't know who he is.
Yeah. Oh, we need to pitch that. Pitch it again to J.K. Rowling. I know she's very busy writing screenplays to 5 Fantastic Beasts films, but I'm sure she can get around to that afterwards. But we need to move to the other amazing character. You own his staff and the wand. Kane, sorry. Lucius Malfoy. The most just dapper and suavest, most despicable character in the entire Harry Potter series. Originally going to be also cast by Richard E. Grant or Bill Nighy. And Bill Nighy was later cast as Rufus Scrimgeour,
who becomes Minister of Magic. He would have been an awful Lucius Malfoy.
Yeah.
There can only be one. And we have it. Why have I forgotten his name?
Jason Isaacs.
Hello, Jason Isaacs. Yes, we know. And the best thing is, I mean, you told me this, but I think you just found this out before we started recording. I've known it for years. The long hair was Jason Isaacs' idea, as was his cane.
He had so much input into this character to make it what it is.
And as well, at Harry Potter Studio Tour, the cover photo to my album is Lucius Malfoy's wig on a mannequin with pins sticking through it. When I saw that, I was so happy, and I cannot wait to go back to get closer to it. It's just, he's this fantastic character. Like, he's such an idiot. And you don't really see it in this film. You see it in the later films, but everything about him is just off. And the fact he's brainwashed this kid of his, but the way he talks to Draco, don't touch Draco.
He's like, come, Draco.
And it's just the way, you've had the build-up for a year of, my father will hear about this. And then we finally meet him.
We get it. We get it with this movie.
And it's his introduction from his dismemberment of the Weasley family to,
even Hermione's parents as well. There's a scene where played by different people in 7 Part 1. Obviously, like Caitlin Stark plays Hermione's mum in that movie, doesn't she? But there's a moment where he's talking to Hermione. Now, he doesn't like Muggle-borns. All about like pure bloods. Don't want any mudbloods here. And he says to Hermione like, "Oh, interesting people, your parents." Muggles, aren't they? And it like cuts to them. He's such a slimy character.
And then he goes straight to red hair, vacant expressions, tatty second-hand book. You must be the Weasleys.
And when he said vacant expressions when I watched it yesterday, it just reminded me of Scar from Be Prepared. It's clear from your vacant expressions, the lights are not all on upstairs.
Jason Isaacs, maybe he can play Scar in the
I'd be fine with that. I'd be fine with that.
Now I've said I want it to happen. But he's I don't think he's despicable, although he's meant to be. But every time he's on screen, he has the presence, and he is the right match to Malfoy's father's history.
Yeah, I was going to say, he has that air of dignity still about himself, like the way he carries himself, the way he like walks into a room.
We don't really have characters teased as much as we did, although it was only one film. He's so sporadically. I think he's in two scenes in this one, 2 scenes in the 4th one.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't get him in the 3rd one. He's mentioned in the 3rd one. I just watched that earlier today. They tease him sort of like the right amount and bring in when they need to.
And he's used so well. And we talk about functioning fathers, and Lucius Malfoy is the only person in the entire Harry Potter series, the adult characters, to actually develop as a character.
Yeah,
he starts off as the arrogant. He's clearly a fan of Voldemort. He even mentions Harry bringing up saying Voldemort's name and all this. And obviously he then find out he's a Death Eater, he's, evil, blah, blah, blah. Then you hit the last film and he's got this stubble.
Yeah.
He's lost his wand.
Completely bedraggled.
All he cares about is his son. And for the first time you see character development in an adult. And, he actually leaves Voldemort. They just walk away and get the hell out of there rather than stay. And although Lucius was one of Voldemort's right-hand men, how he got Tom Riddle's diary, it's so brilliantly done across these films, and I love Lucius. There's so much more I want to see. He even has the best Death Eater mask out of everyone too.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know if you want to save this until the end of our Chamber of Secrets review. I mean, we're at 45 minutes at the minute, and we still haven't really tapped into the meat of this story yet. But I think we'll save it, the bit where he almost straight up murders Harry Potter.
Yeah.
We'll talk much more about that later. So after this, what can we really talk about? We have Filch, where they get to Hogwarts in the flying car. Oh dear, we are in trouble. We see Severus Snape again, all that stuff. It's a very sort of like different welcome to Hogwarts in the first one, but you initially had the moment where you do get that awe-inspiring moment where you are led in. With McGonagall in the first one, you really can't recreate that a second time, so I think they do skirt around that in a much more effective way in this one. I'm sort of reaching here. Is there anything you want to talk about in the main storyline? Is it like the Quidditch, or...?
Do I want to talk about Quidditch? Vaguely. I want to talk about the introduction of Mudblood.
Yes.
And I've got... This represents the Harry Potter series in general, but at the age of 6, I saw this film. And Mudblood is basically, you're not pure blood, half blood, blah, blah, blah. Mudblood, you're filth. They're introducing such racist and adult themes in these children's films, and the message you get is so well done because it's not patronising. Yeah. And I know this is talking about 7 films in once, but you're introduced to it in the second film, and it's so well done. And I know this sounds bizarre, but it opens up another layer to the Harry Potter universe. It's vaguely mentioned in the first one about being a half-blood, shames like my dad's a muggle, my mum's a witch.
Yeah.
But this one, you're getting the proper racist stuff, and it's the build-up to finding out what a mudblood is. And I just remember being fascinating at a young age that there is this class system in the wizarding world, and it goes to credit to J.K., who keeps developing it further and further down the line. And these are very adult themes. We still talk about it today. And then this isn't really Harry Pottery, but it is, and it's massive. Growing up with stuff like this introduces you to the sort of darker side of humanity a bit, especially given Voldemort just wants to kill everyone that's not a wizard. It's very reminiscent of 1945 itself.
Yeah.
But that comes to the brilliant scene of when Ron eats slugs, but that all comes down to Malfoy joining the Quidditch team with the slickest Nimbus 2001s, which Lucius has paid for too.
Yeah, they look like they're made of plastic though. They look like they're made of black plastic.
They look great. They look sleek, shiny, polished. They look like much nicer than the Nimbus 2000. And I want one. It looks nice in the Firebolt too.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I was disappointed with the design of the Firebolt, especially after watching Prisoner of Azkaban which is the ending of that movie. I don't know, I'll always have a place for the Nimbus 2001s in my heart. Nimbus 2000s in my heart. I don't know whether to talk about the Defence Against the Dark Arts lesson or whether to talk about Quidditch first, considering we're on the topic of the broomsticks.
Go for the Quidditch match.
Yeah. So, again, sort of what I was saying just a minute ago, how like the whole entrance to Hogwarts is sort of like skirted around because we'd already seen that in the first movie. You can't recreate the magic from that. It's kind of the same with the Quidditch match, I would say, and really the only other way you can go about it, for example, it doesn't show you the whole behind the stadium as they're ready to go onto the pitch or the start of the match. It kind of just throws you straight into it. They really ramp up the action with it though. I mean, we get to see all in the stands. Harry and Draco are flying all in between the stands. We get the bludger sort of like smacking into the stands and everything like that. So they really do ramp it up that way. And you told me about this, God, it must have been a couple of months ago, about the soundtrack during this scene and how it's basically a complete recreation of the Coruscant speeder chase from Attack of the Clones.
Which came out in the same year.
Which came out in the same year, and maybe that's one of the reasons that John Williams was kind of just like, I have limited time to make this score. The film's going to be out at this particular time. I'm just going to have to get previous tracks that I've written. That's the only reason I can suggest that he would have done that. And it is exactly the same. I heard it a lot more when I was watching it yesterday. It still completely fits the scene, though, and let's be honest, although John Williams is one of the greatest composers of all time, his scores do kind of sound very similar, especially in the kind of filler, action-y sort of music, I would say, and that's the case here. But I love this Quidditch match. Whether I like it as much as the Quidditch match from the first movie, I'm not sure. but I do like that kind of added rivalry to the match with Draco being added into the mix.
Yeah, and it builds up their rivalry a lot more as well, because you want to see more Quidditch, and they can introduce his school nemesis, which is Draco Malfoy, in his identical role as Seeker with these faster broomsticks. And it makes it even better when Harry does win from the hero's journey. He's on the slower broom, but the talent has found his way through.
And they set that up with the first one as well, don't they, when Draco takes the Remembrall? I mean, he's the first one, not counting Neville, he's the first one to successfully pilot the broomstick.
And he does a 360-degree spin on that broomstick too.
He does, yeah.
And in the books they hint at his jealousy that Harry was originally a Seeker, and Draco actually said he wanted to be a Seeker, all this stuff. So, which is great for their dynamic. And then you actually have, again, the hero Lucius watching from the stands with his badass cane, and his face of disgust when Draco he falls off his broom.
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
And Harry just, catches it, leading to another glorious moment from Gilderoy Lockhart.
Oh, he rushes onto the pitch, and even Harry's like, no, don't do anything. Wait till I get taken to the hospital wing. He's like, oh, poor boy doesn't know what he's saying. Now this won't hurt a bit. Breaks out the Brachium Mendo spell, which is meant to obviously mend Harry Potter's arm. Completely removes the bones from it. But, Gilderoy Lockhart, ever the optimist, much more flexible, though. God, he's so awesome. I love it. And then I don't think we see him for quite a while after that. I think it's right up until just before the whole entrance to the Chamber of Secrets thing we see him again. But God, he doesn't half leave his impact in his scenes. I just love Gilderoy Lockhart so much. Moving on from there then. So sort of skipping through the film a bit more now. I know we've sort of like skirted across a lot of the scenes, but it is quite a long film. One of the other biggest set pieces of the entire film is the return to the Forbidden Forest, or the Dark Forest. I think they kind of flip between the two names throughout the series, where Hagrid sort of like tips them off. He's having to go to Azkaban prison, immediately sets up Azkaban for the next movie with that moment, and he says they need to follow the spiders into the Forbidden Forest and they will find what they're looking for. So we get there, they follow the spiders, and we get introduced to a character called Aragog, who is shown in a flashback scene with Tom Riddle. Really, really effective flashback scene, actually, where it's all kind of done in black and white or sepia with young Hagrid. And we get to see Aragog in its full glory now. What I noticed watching it yesterday was that this thing is definitely more of an animatronic than I remembered it being. I thought it was almost completely CGI every shot we see it, and whilst it is CGI in some shots, the puppet they build for this thing is really impressive, and they film it in such a way where you only get small glimpses of it here and there. It might be from the back and you get sort of like a couple of legs in the shot, or most prominently is with the eyes, with the multiple like 8 or 10 eyes or however many eyes spiders have. And it really does add that kind of tangibility to this creature. And I think that actually, why am I blanking on the guy's name who plays Ron? Rupert Grint. I actually think he's arachnophobic in real life. So
he is. He said it before, and I think as a kid he must have been terrified. I mean, the behind-the-scenes stuff, it's not just the creation of Aragog, it's the fact that there was a 50-foot spider. They essentially took a real spider and just made it 50 times its size.
Yeah.
Everything from the hairs, which are quite creepy, to the pincers, to the eyes. There's something not scary to me, but if you were an arachnophobic, and there's so many of them, that must be terrifying, especially as an 11-year-old out on a film set.
Yeah.
Because it moved. And they did it so well of hiding it in the darkness and not relying on just him appearing. So he is a terrifying creature, and it's one of their best ones, especially given the early days. And that if that was done today, that would be CGI and it would not look as good.
No, definitely. And I'm actually just checking now because I knew I recognised the name from somewhere. Grandmaster Pycelle.
Yeah, I was literally about to tell you this.
Does the voice of Aragog, which I found out last night when I was watching the credits.
So he's done Star Wars, Game of Thrones,
Indiana Jones,
Harry Potter, Indiana Jones. He's done them all.
He's hit them. Yeah. God, he's awesome. And the voice completely works as well. The voice really, really works. It doesn't sound like him to me when I watch this movie. So I think we need to just get to the Chamber of Secrets now. We also get introduced to Moaning Myrtle and the whole Polyjuice potion thing, and that's a great scene in itself. But the actual entrance to the Chamber of Secrets is fantastic. So Harry basically brings along Gilderoy Lockhart. They force him along with them to get to the Chamber of Secrets. I'm not actually sure why they bring him along. Did they ever say why they bring him along? I can't remember.
What, Lockhart?
Yeah.
Because
is it just to stop him from fleeing?
Yeah, because they want to catch him, and at this point they kind of know he's useless, but they still want him to help Ginny.
Yeah.
But I'm happy he's there along for the journey, especially when they took him down the pit first and all that stuff.
It's really quite filthy down here. So they get down into the pit, and there's that great confrontation scene where Gilderoy Lockhart thinks he's got the upper hand. He kind of pretends that he's fainted, gets back up, snatches Ron's wand, but as we know, Ron's wand is broken. So the curse backfires, the Obliviate charm, which comes back in a much more emotional scene in Harry Potter Part 1. And even just like dumb and completely just mind-wiped Gilderoy Lockhart is amazing. The bit where he quizzically picks up a rock, sort of like tosses it in the air and catches it, is like, do you live here? And that's really like the kind of last bit we see of him, other than the bit where, they're flying out the thing and he says it's just like magic. Ron just kind of clonks him on the head with a rock, which seems a bit brutal, to be honest, because he was kind of just like a little child in this moment. But then... Oh, God, sorry.
So I was going to say, I thought the whole scene's hilarious, especially when Lockhart takes Ron's wand. His face at this point, it's just red and sweating, and he's still smiling through it, and he already gives his explanation of how he wasn't able to save the girl, and how the boy he lived valiantly for, or something. No, that's Voldemort valiantly, but
how you both tragically lost your minds at the sight of her mangled body.
Exactly. He's already thought it through how he's going to sell the story. But I love it, and going into the Chamber of Secrets, that's that last bit of comic relief you want before you finally get there and get to the dirty bits and find out more about Tom Riddle.
Yeah, and I will say the one thing I don't like about this movie is the casting of Tom Riddle. I was never creeped out by him. I was never intimidated or anything like that. I found him just kind of like a little sort of like jumped up, prissy kind of student.
That's what he is. He's the top of the class boy, head boy, all the glory for himself, and teachers love him, students love him. I think they kind of nail it, especially when Ginny falls for him as well.
He just didn't have that undertone of darkness to me. Like when we get to the kid from, I think it's Half-Blood Prince, the actor they picked for the
creep. That's Ralph Fiennes' nephew, actually. Believe it or not, I'm dropping a bomb early here, 4 films early. It's Ralph Fiennes' nephew that plays Voldemort, which is mental.
And cool. See, I think he had that, you could tell that he would grow up to be this very popular student, very sort of well-respected family, everything like that, but he had that air of darkness to him. And it's kind of like when people talk about the casting of Anakin Skywalker, how Jake Lloyd was a mistake because he was too sort of nice and there wasn't that undertone of what the future self that he would become. I kind of have that with the Tom Riddle character from this movie. Doesn't detract from the film, because let's be honest, the whole Basilisk climax is awesome. And when I was a kid, I actually remember it going on for much longer than it actually is in the film. But even the effects and stuff, I mean, we haven't even talked about Fawkes the Phoenix or anything like that, or the whole Godric Gryffindor sword. The soundtrack, Fawkes the Phoenix, is one of my favourite Harry Potter themes throughout it.
It's I would say, is one of John Williams' strongest ever songs, let alone from the Harry Potter series.
And I mean, there's a lot of themes that don't get carried over, sadly, from John Williams' work. Stuff from Prisoner of Azkaban, mostly from these two. Notably the Voldemort theme, which I really, really wish had got carried on into all the other ones. But Fawkes the Phoenix is another one, because I believe we go back to Dumbledore's office at some point in the later films and we see Fawkes again. It would have been nice to have had that theme reprised a little. Because really, the soundtrack to this film... I would say the soundtrack to Chamber of Secrets is my favourite John Williams score. I'm going to sort of find out the guy who helped him with the score, if you want to sort of carry on.
Yeah, so if we're going to talk about the soundtrack, I have not necessarily the Chamber of Secrets song, we spoke about Lockhart's, but I love the Flying Car one. It's just this sort of wonderful world to the Harry Potter that continues to expand. And it's great, it suits it. It's got the kind of Dursley's vibe to it, and as you get off towards the Burrow, it's this neat song that kind of epitomises the moments that you see.
Yeah,
it's a great soundtrack, and I know you always compare it to Indy, but I knew the Gilderoy Lockhart theme before I knew Last Crusade, so to me it would always be his.
Yeah.
However, the Quidditch one I remember noticing, and I think that as we said earlier, it's just down to the release schedule, probably having to compose it. So why not repeat it? Because it's similar speeder bike chase to a broomstick chase.
Yeah, and I'm just reading here, I'm reading directly off IMDb here in the trivia section. It's got, due to schedule conflicts, John Williams was not able to deliver a fully elaborate score. Composer-arranger William Ross was hired to adapt Williams' material to complete the film's score and was subsequently conducting the orchestra during the recording sessions. It's not a bad score, and I like that actually that they use a lot of the themes from the first one because it really gives you that continuity sense, which I think was tragically lost in the later Harry Potter films, even with Prisoner of Azkaban, which was still scored by John Williams, but that really came up with mostly completely original scores with no carryover songs in it, apart from maybe the final scene. But I remember just listening to, I've got all the soundtracks on CD, and when I was a kid, I was always big into my film soundtracks, still very much am. And I would play Chamber of Secrets the most, I think. Forks the Phoenix was always one. I'm going to get the CD actually now so I can remember the track list if you want to just carry on.
I can list the track list for you. I have it right on my screen on my iTunes.
Oh, I've got it now. Reunion of Friends, as I said, was my favourite one. Dueling the Basilisk, that whole song is awesome. And it's the moment in the film when the sword appears in the hat. There's a musical change in that track, which is awesome. And I know I'm sort of like geeking out about music right now, but this is really, really, truly a great score.
It is, and they're so vast as well. They don't all sound the same as sort of soundtracks do. They vary between themselves.
Yeah.
And that's what's great, because there's a Harry Potter tone to the entirety of it, but it does disappear when it needs to. And I love it. Even stuff like the Dueling Club, there's this tense beat that perfectly matches what you see on screen, followed by Snape destroying Lockhart, the man who took the job from him.
That scene, we didn't even talk about the Dueling Club scene. I love that scene, and you're right about the whole marketing thing in the trailers, how this scene was really probably played up to the max. Not only do you get that duel between Gilderoy Lockhart and Snape, because Snape really wants to position him defense against the dark arts, but it's again bringing back Draco and Harry Potter. Actually thinking about this and talking about this now with you, really the rivalry, this is probably the biggest rivalry they have in the entire series, apart from maybe like 6.
Yeah, I was going to say 6 is a lot more adult rivalry.
Yeah, it gets a lot more violent, doesn't it?
But also, one of the biggest scenes, this introduces us to Harry Potter being Parseltongue, which is, well known in the first film, but it's not known that it's not common for wizards in the second film. And that breeds later on into the film. There's the whole heir of Slytherin, even tied up to the Horcruxes, which I'll go on about the sixth film rather than this one. True story. Half-Blood Prince was originally the name for the Chamber of Secrets.
Really?
They changed it, yeah. I think that's very interesting, because Harry technically is a half-blood.
Yeah.
As is Voldemort.
Yeah. That would have been cool.
That's quite a nice little Easter egg, I think, that did come back later on into the fold.
Yeah. And with this one, this is, I would say, even more so than the first one, this is kind of the foundation for what is to come later down the line. Now, whether she planned all this out, I have no idea. For example, actually, going back to the Parseltongue thing, it did kind of weird me out, though, when you go back to Philosopher's Stone and he talks to the snake behind the glass in London Zoo. He wasn't speaking in Parseltongue there. Whether he actually was, and it was sort of like Harry's perception, and you kind of argue it that way, that's fair enough.
Yeah, so the way they do it is he's speaking to Harry, from our point of view, he's speaking English.
Yeah.
And just like the first time in the Dueling Club, they do change it to being Parseltongue, but they've got the synth to the top of it. And later on down the line, it's not known in the first book that he is one, so it's about delaying it, but he is on his own, so it is very much his viewpoint in that first film. Yeah. But we find out later on that Voldemort shares it, that he thought it was common to speak to snakes, and Dumbledore knows from the off that something's not right there.
And it really is that crisis of identity in Harry Potter, and that's why I like this one so much, because even his friends, there's even that scene where I think they're all in like an exam or something, or taking notes, and even Ron and Hermione are questioning him and think that he might be the heir to Slytherin. It really does kind of alienate Harry Potter in this one, and I like all the parallels that we get, that get brought up between him and Voldemort or Tom Riddle. There's the scene at the end where he destroys what we later know is a Horcrux with the diary of Tom Riddle. Now, in later context, we should know that Harry Potter would be in pain destroying this Horcrux because it is a part of him still, which comes into it more later on down the line. This is why I think that she didn't have a fully fledged plan. She did.
The way the Horcruxes work, only towards the end do you notice. So Voldemort's so damaged already in this film. He's damaged as in last time you see him, he's a ghost. He's not fully formed, and he isn't aware of the Horcruxes being destroyed until he does start to feel it, and he's aware that they are searching for the Horcruxes.
Right.
So Harry doesn't feel pain until the last one when Dumbledore destroys the ring. Harry's never felt that at all. So it's just the way. I think that the films add that more to the last than the last book does, that he feels it towards the end.
It's like the feeling intensifies as you get closer to wiping them all out. Yeah,
that's what they make clear in the books, but you can't really make thoughts clear in films, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that it is a Horcrux, and J.K. Rowling started writing these books in 1990, and the first one got published in I think 96 or 7 maybe.
Yeah.
So she had a 5-6 year plan of writing, and she had the complete story. It was obviously just tying it in and doing it right, which is why specifically 4 and 5 are so much longer, because she said that she wanted Harry to be informed away from Hogwarts about certain things by creating Hogsmeade, and I'm going off here, but that's why she takes it to Quidditch World Cup. They have to leave Hogwarts for him to learn about the darker side of it all, which perfectly makes sense when the Horcrux stuff. But the book does alert Dumbledore to the Horcruxes because he works out from that day when he gives him the diary.
Yeah. And we're coming up to just over an hour. Well, we are over an hour now, but we really have 2 other scenes to talk about. I would say the ending and the other Lucius scene, which I feel we need to talk about. Mostly just for Jason Isaacs' incredible improvisation in this scene. We needed a closure to the Lucius Malfoy character, especially with this film, which did set him up as kind of a secondary antagonist almost. And he comes in, we get the reveal that Dobby is actually the house elf belonging to the Malfoy family. And we get some sweet, sweet trash talking between Harry Potter and Jason Isaac. Lucius Malfoy, sorry. Which was improvised, and you actually told me about that.
Yeah, so Jason Isaacs in an interview where he said he just Chris Columbus said to him, goes, if you've got anything to say, say it. This actually relates to the scene. But he goes, let us hope that Mr. Potter will also be around to help save the day. That's improvised. But then straight away, Daniel Radcliffe spat back with, don't worry, I will be.
And Jason Isaac said he was actually really impressed with how, Daniel Radcliffe was maturing with his acting.
And I think they all were. You see these interviews backstage where they all said, we were kids, but we wanted to learn it. We wanted to better ourselves. And then I think it does work wonders because it's such an iconic line. You wouldn't think it is an improv one. And then there's the Dobby improv when Jason Isaacs found out that Dobby's not a puppet or anything, that he's complete CGI. So he just turns around and kicks the air, and Chris Columbus says to him, goes, are you okay? He's like, oh yeah, I've just kicked Dobby, haven't I?
And then he smacks him with the cane as well, doesn't he?
Yeah, he hits him on the head afterwards. So that's improv, and that's 2 of the funnier moments. So Jason Isaacs has got a lot of credit for making Lucius as
what he was, yeah.
Yeah, because in the books, he's far more detestable. He's not likeable in the books, but he is in the film, and that's down to the performance and the enhancements, I could say, of him. Yeah,
and I'm just reading here, actually, that Jason Isaacs originally auditioned for Gilderoy Lockhart, but, Chris Columbus suggested he should try for Lucius Malfoy, and Jason Isaacs originally didn't want to do it because he thought it would be too similar to Captain Hook. Thank God he did play him. It would have been it's been an interesting experiment to see him as Gilderoy Lockhart, but Kenneth Branagh is Gilderoy Lockhart to me, and Jason Isaacs is Lucius Malfoy to me. I can't differentiate those 2. And then we get out in the corridor where Harry frees Dobby by giving him a sock. If you give a house elf an item of clothing, then that frees them, I guess. Yep. Although technically Lucius Malfoy already did that. Granted, it was a pillowcase, but it's technically an item of clothing.
The house elf has to wear that thing. Every house elf wears one.
Oh, okay. Okay.
When they are given clothing, they are free. Harry so slyly hides it in Lucius Malfoy's diary, Tom Riddle's diary.
Yeah, but it's kind of a nice, just sort of like back in the face, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and then he proceeds to use the killing curse upon a 12-year-old boy,
which I didn't know at that time. I didn't know at that time. It wasn't until I got further on into the films. I think it must have been, where's Avada Kedavra first used? It's in Goblet of Fire, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Order of the Phoenix and stuff like that. And then when I went back to watch Chamber of Secrets and realised he was saying Avada and was getting ready to say Cadavra, I was like, oh shit, it added a whole new dimension to the Lucius Malfoy character, which I'd never seen before. The fact that he was about to do that outside of Dumbledore's office, being
it's
like
amazing.
a reputable family and part of the, the, what's the word I'm looking for? The ministry, yeah, part of the ministry as well. Well to do. I love that line as well. I never even picked up on that before, where Dumbledore says that, you got me not sacked, but you got me. Oh god, I'm blanking on words. Yeah, he was like, yeah. They asked him to step down while this whole Chamber of Secrets thing blew over, and he says that Malfoy had got all these signatures from all the key members of the Ministry. We later find out that he threatened to curse them and all of their families if they didn't sign it, which is so awesome.
The backstory is that his plan, he wanted Hogwarts not allow half-bloods and mudbloods in. He wanted Malfoy at Durmstrang, which is a pure-blood aimed school. Anyway, so he set up this plan to have Dumbledore removed, and all of this came down to Malfoy requesting to move some books about muggles from the shelves at Hogwarts in their library. Yeah. Dumbledore refused, so he made it his personal vendetta to remove Dumbledore from power by giving Ginny the diary to open the Chamber of Secrets, because he knew about what the diary was capable of. He didn't know it was a Horcrux, though. Later on in the sixth film, I'll talk about that.
Yeah.
So
and then, okay, sorry.
The entirety of the Chamber of Secrets is all Lucius Malfoy's ploy.
Yep.
Which is insane, to remove Dumbledore just to have some purebloods be let in.
Yeah, and it completely ties in with that whole great backstory we get delivered by McGonagall earlier on in the film. Really, really awesome history with Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin. I love that whole monologue. It really does help flesh out the world and the history. And I was kind of sitting on the edge of my seat as well, even though I've seen this film countless times, sort of discovering all this new stuff. But that really takes us to the final, the final shot of the movie, the final scene. Hagrid comes back, reunion of friends, my favourite John Williams song in the Harry Potter franchise. So emotional. I was really glad that they reused it in the ending of Deathly Hallows Part 2. And Harry says there is no Hogwarts without you, Hagrid. And I think that's so true. And I think that's a fact that sadly gets forgotten about as the series moves on. Yes, other characters become more prevalent and important, that we need to focus on screen time. But I do think it's a shame how Robbie Coltrane's character does kind of take a back seat. Maybe not in... Prisoner of Azkaban or Goblet of Fire, but certainly down the line, that element is lost. And I think the final scene and sort of how the music crescendos into the Harry Potter theme as the camera zooms out of the Great Hall to the castle, I think it is a really, really nice shot to end Chris Columbus's sort of run on directing the Harry Potter films. I think it's really nice, and it's kind of, there you go, everyone. That's my Harry Potter. That's my take on it for the first two. Now, whoever else comes along next, it's in your hands now to continue this franchise. And I think it's a really nice ending. It's my favourite ending to all the Harry Potter films.
Really?
Yeah.
It's a great ending with Hagrid. The only thing I would say is, what I love, it's such a tease to the next film when Cornelius Fudge tells Hagrid, you're going to go to Azkaban.
Yeah.
Hagrid is shitting it. And at this point, we just know that Azkaban's a wizard prison. We don't actually know anything about it, and they don't explore it in the third film because they don't really have the time, but Harry and Ron and Hermione talk about how shook up Hagrid was by mentioning Azkaban. Now they've got a prisoner loose. Yeah. So I think that ties in really nicely to Prisoner of Azkaban, just the brief mentions of the wizard prison. Yeah,
definitely. Well, we've come up to almost an hour and 15 minutes on Chamber of Secrets. I did not expect... Well, actually, I did expect to talk for that long for this one because it is my favourite. Well, it is one of my favourites. There is a lot to talk about it in terms of how it advances the story and set up for the future ones. I could probably talk for another hour and 15 on this movie if I could, but I think we've pretty much covered everything in this movie that we physically can. So I think that'll do it. Thank you for watching our review for Harry Potter Month on Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Our next review will, of course, be Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. We should be recording that sometime this weekend or next week. Do hit that subscribe button because you won't just be keeping up to date with all of these reviews, but all the other ones we bring out. There'll be reactions from me, other movies that come out this month as well. We'll be bringing you reviews on those, but guarantee there will be a lot more Harry Potter videos to come. So that'll do it for us now, and until the next review, we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.
Mischief managed.